The heavy steel door slammed shut with a metallic echo that rattled the walls of the Texas National Guard Armory. Jessica Kane froze for half a second, startled more by the sound than the act itself. She turned, expecting to see a soldier securing the door behind her. Instead, she was greeted by silence. The slam hadn't come from a guard. The locking mechanism clicked, deliberate and cold, and in that instant, the air inside the armory shifted. She set down the box of medical kits she had been carrying, her heartbeat quickening. The room was large, filled with racks of rifles, crates of ammunition, and the faint smell of gun oil that clung to every corner. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor, broken by thin beams of light filtering through narrow windows high. Along the wall, Jessica felt the prickle on the back of her neck, the sixth sense she had learned never to ignore. She wasn't alone. From the darkness, figures emerged. One, then two, then more. 6 in total, all masked, dressed in black, moving with the sharpness of men who had done this before. Their boots scraped against the concrete, and their hands clutched weapons, pistols, a shotgun, a short-barreled rifle. Not military grade. Discipline, but not amateurs either. "Look what we've got here," one of them said, his voice muffled behind a mask. "Little delivery girl brought us some presents." They chuckled, the sound echoing against the armory's steel walls. Jessica straightened, instinctively stepping back toward the nearest rack of equipment. She kept her face calm, her expression neutral. Inside, her mind began racing, calculating, cataloging, and preparing. They thought she was trapped. They thought she was just another civilian who had stumbled into their operation at the wrong time. She looked the part. Jeans, sneakers, a gray hoodie with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows, her dark hair tied back loosely. Nothing about her screamed threat. Nothing about her suggested what she had once been. The leader, taller than the rest and carrying himself with arrogance, stepped closer. He pointed his rifle lazily at her chest. "Drop the box," he ordered. Jessica didn't argue. She bent slowly, set the box down, and raised her hands to shoulder level. Her breathing was steady, her eyes fixed on his weapon, noting the way he held its sloppy grip, weight leaning back instead of forward. Not trained. Dangerous, yes, but not trained. "Good girl," he mocked. "Now, why don't you tell us what you're doing here after hours?" She said nothing. Words were unnecessary. The men spread out, 2 heading toward the racks, 1 standing guard by the rear exit, the others circling her like wolves around prey. To them, she was cornered, powerless. But Jessica's silence unsettled them. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of calculation. She remembered nights overseas, crouched in ruined buildings, waiting for enemy movement. Silence had been her weapon then, and it was her weapon now. Her eyes flicked across the room. 6 men total. Closest was 7 feet away. Guard at the exit had a twitchy grip on his pistol. Crates stacked in the corner could be used as cover. A wrench lay forgotten near a toolbox. Every detail mattered. Every detail was stored away. The leader tilted his head, noticing her steady gaze. "You're not scared, are you?" he asked. There was a challenge in his tone, the need to provoke a reaction. Jessica met his eyes, unblinking. "Should I be?" That single sentence made 2 of the men shift uncomfortably. The leader smirked, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. Something about her unnerved him. He didn't know why. He couldn't possibly guess that she had spent years training with one of the most elite units in the world, that she had endured Hell Week, freezing surf torture, endless marshes with sandbags that cut into her shoulders until her skin bled, that she had fought in deserts and cities far from home, carrying secrets the public would never know. No, to him, she was just a woman caught in the wrong place. But some instinct warned him She wasn't ordinary. He stepped closer, the muzzle of his rifle inches from her chest. "You're in over your head, sweetheart. Do what we say, and maybe we won't make this messy." Jessica's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It wasn't forced. It wasn't reckless. It was the smile of someone who had already decided that when the moment came, she wouldn't hesitate. Her body was loose, relaxed. On the surface, she seemed compliant. Inside, her mind ticked like a clock, waiting for the perfect second. She could already see the sequence. Disarm the closest, use his weapon against the others, take control before they understood what happened. But not yet. Timing was everything. One of the men rummaged through a crate, pulling out a rifle. "Boss, they've got the good stuff here," he said eagerly. The leader's grin widened. "Then tonight just got a whole lot better." Jessica shifted her stance, just enough to test her balance. Her fingers itched to move, but she restrained herself. She had learned patience the hard way, waiting hours in the rain for a target, staying still while her muscles screamed. Compared to those nights, this was easy. Her silence became its own weapon. The men kept glancing at her, expecting pleading, begging, tears. Instead, she stood calm, her eyes sharp, her body coiled. And in that stillness, something shifted. For the first time, doubt flickered in their expressions. They had locked her in the armory, believing they had control. But they were beginning to sense the truth, the unsettling, bone-deep truth that they had walked into a cage with something they couldn't quite define. Jessica Kane wasn't their prisoner. She was their storm, waiting to break. The leader's rifle stayed trained on Jessica, his eyes narrowing as if trying to peel back the layers of her calm. Most people begged when a gun hovered inches from their chest. Most people trembled, cried, or broke into frantic words, desperately, trying to humanize themselves in the eyes of their captors. Jessica did none of those things. She simply watched. Her stillness unnerved them. It wasn't passive. It was alive, deliberate, like a panther crouched in tall grass, unseen but ready. She let them mistake her silence for obedience. She had learned long ago that power lived in the unseen, hidden strength, unsettled men who thrived on dominance. The leader licked his lips. "You've got guts. I'll give you that." His voice carried false bravado. He didn't like not being in control. He wasn't used to a target looking back at him like that. Jessica shifted her weight ever so slightly, her senses expanding outward. The room became a map in her mind. Every exit, every obstacle. Two men were by the racks now, greedily pawing through crates of ammunition. One stood by the rear door, pistol gripped too tightly. Another circled her, trying to loom as if proximity alone could intimidate her. The last stood closer to the leader, shotgun held low but ready, 6 against 1. On paper, the odds were ridiculous, but Jessica didn't live on paper. She lived in calculations. Her breathing slowed, heartbeat steady. She counted steps, measured space, and cataloged details. The guards circling her wore cheap sneakers, poor traction on concrete. The man at the door had a nervous twitch, constantly shifting his weight. The one with the shotgun gripped it too. Loosely, his finger dangerously close to the trigger. Sloppy, sloppy, sloppy meant exploitable. "Lady," one of them sneered, "you're real quiet for someone about to have a bad night." Jessica's eyes flicked toward him, and in that single glance, she let him feel the weight of her presence. She had learned that silence wasn't just absence of words. It was a language of its own. A hard stare, a steady breath, a body unshaken. Under threat. That silence told him what he didn't want to hear. You're not in control. Not anymore. Her mind reached back to the beaches of Coronado during Bud S. training. The sound of instructors barking, the roar of waves swallowing her body, the burning in her lungs as she carried a log through sand that ate at her legs. They had screamed at her to quit, demanded she give up. She hadn't. She had learned then. That control wasn't about noise. It was about holding still when the world tried to break you. Now in this armory, that lesson returned. She was still. They were unraveling. The leader gestured at one of his men. Check her for a phone. The closest stepped forward, smirking beneath his mask. He reached for her pocket. Jessica tilted. Her head slightly, not moving otherwise. As his hand brushed her hoodie, her eyes locked on his wrist. She could already see the tendon exposed, the weak point if she twisted just right. But she restrained herself. Not yet. Patience. The wrong move too early could end the game before it began. The man patted her down sloppily, found nothing, and stepped back, clean. Good, the leader muttered, distracted by the crates. His greed was loud. He wasn't here just to scare someone. He was here for weapons. That made him predictable. Predictable meant controllable. Jessica adjusted. Her stance, pretending to stretch her neck. Her eyes scanned the floor again. A length of electrical cable, coiled near a toolbox. Zip ties spilled halfway out of a drawer. A loose wrench. Every piece of the environment was a tool. SEAL training had drilled it into her. The battlefield. Provides. It always provides. The man by the door shifted again, tapping his boot nervously. She remembered men like him, overseas trigger-happy, impulsive, the kind who panicked under pressure. He'd be the first to break. Her silence continued. It stretched long enough that even the men rummaging through weapons glanced at her. People feared silence because it forced them to hear their own thoughts. These men were no different. The leader grew irritated. "What's your name?" Jessica didn't answer. He stepped closer, rifle lifting higher, closer to her face now. "I asked you a question." Still, she didn't respond. The man with the shotgun chuckled. "She's mute or something?" Jessica let the corners of her mouth twitch into the faintest smirk. That tiny gesture, a spark of amusement, was louder than any insult. The leader's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being ignored. He leaned closer, his voice a hiss. "You think this is funny?" Jessica finally spoke, her tone even, her eyes sharp as glass. "I think you don't know what you've just done." The room froze for half a beat. Even the men digging through crates paused, unsettled by the weight of her words. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Calm, certain, like a weathered soldier who had seen storms these men couldn't imagine. The leader stepped back, masking his unease with a sneer. Tough talk. But the doubt had already crept into his eyes. Jessica's smirk faded, her face returning to its mask of calm. Inside, though, her blood hummed. The game had shifted. Her words weren't bravado. They were a countdown. A reminder to herself as much as to them. Not yet. Not yet. But soon. The air grew heavier, thicker. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, blending with the faint sounds of crates being dragged and weapons clinking. To the intruders, it was business as usual. To Jessica, it was the sound of opportunity. Building. She remembered instructors' voices in her head. Calm is control. Panic is death. So she breathed, she waited, she calculated. And the men around her, for all their weapons and numbers, had no idea that the quiet woman in front of them was already orchestrating their downfall one breath at a time. Jessica bent low, as if fussing with her sneaker, fingers tugging at a lace that didn't need fixing. To the intruders, it looked like nervous stalling, an attempt to ground herself under pressure. They smirked. They thought they understood. Weakness when they saw it. But Jessica wasn't adjusting a shoe. Her eyes scanned the ground, precise as a scope. That's when she saw it. A wrench, half hidden beneath a crate, streaked with grease, heavy enough to break bone if used right. She slid her foot forward, nudging it an inch closer, subtle enough not to draw suspicion. Her mind raced through possibilities. Disarm, disable, control. Every second she weighed outcomes, remembering the cadence of instructors barking during training. Don't think about winning. Think about surviving the first 30 seconds. Survive 30 seconds, and you'll win the fight. The guard nearest her scoffed. She's tying her shoe. Cute. He didn't know she was mapping distances in her head. 7 feet to him, 12 to the leader, 10 to the shotgun carrier. She pictured it like choreography. 1 strike, 1 pivot, 1 weapon. Every muscle in her body hummed, tuned for violence, yet leashed by patience. She looked up, eyes calm, then lowered them again. The wrench gleamed faintly under the harsh lights. Decide, commit, finish, the mantra echoed in her skull. The men returned to their tasks, shoving crates, checking rifles, loading magazines. Their greed dulled their awareness. That was her advantage. Complacency killed faster than bullets. Her mind drifted not aimlessly, but purposefully back to a night overseas. Kandahar, a raid gone wrong. Pinned in a mud-walled compound with insurgents pressing closer. She had been cornered, outnumbered, weapons low. She remembered that same thrum of anticipation, that sharpened edge between fear and clarity. She had survived because she didn't act too soon. Timing, she knew, was everything. Now the Armory became Kandahar all over again. She wasn't panicked. She was preparing. The circling guard sneered, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. "What are you thinking, sweetheart? Planning to run?" Jessica's lips twitched faintly. Not a smile, not a frown, just enough to unnerve him. "Planning," she said softly, her voice almost conversational, "isn't your strong suit." The man blinked. What? But she didn't elaborate. She lowered her head again, focusing on the imaginary knot she pretended to tie. That single phrase was enough. She'd planted a seed. Uncertainty. Doubt. He'd wonder what she meant. He'd think too hard. And when men thought too hard, they hesitated. One hesitation. That was all she needed. The leader barked orders from the far side. "Load everything fast. We don't have long." His voice was tense, his greed clear. He was here for weapons, not blood. That gave her a window. He'd want her alive at least until the crates were secured. A living hostage was leverage. Dead weight was risk. She could use that. Her gaze flicked to the rear door. The guard there tapped his boot nervously, pistol shifting in his grip. She knew his type: eager, jittery, terrified of silence. He'd be the first to panic, and in panic came mistakes. Jessica inhaled deeply, slow and controlled. Her body felt electric, every nerve lit. Her hands twitched faintly, yearning for a weight of the wrench. Not yet, not yet. She reminded herself of the rules: patience, precision, violence of action. The wrench was the trigger. Once she grabbed it, the room would ignite. She needed distraction, something to tilt the balance. As if on cue, the universe delivered. A metallic crash thundered from the far side of the Armory, a crate tipping, slamming onto the concrete. The sound reverberated like a gunshot. Every head snapped toward it. Even the leader cursed under his breath. And that was the moment Jessica knew the storm was ready to break. Her fingers curled into fists, her muscles tensed. She rose slowly, wrench sliding closer beneath her shoe. She was seconds from action. The silence that followed the crash was thick, loaded. The men waited for the leader's reaction. None of them looked at her. She adjusted her stance, subtly shifting weight to her right leg, coiling like a spring. She felt her heart steady, not racing, not panicked, steady like a drummer counting down. 1, 2, 3. The mantra returned in full force. Decide, commit, finish. Jessica Kane was done waiting, and the men who thought they had trapped her were about to learn a brutal truth. Storms don't ask permission before they strike. The crash of the crate still echoed in the armory when Jessica moved. One instant she was crouched, still as stone, fingers brushing her sneaker. The next, she was a blur of precision. Her foot hooked the wrench, sliding it up into her hand. She rose fluidly, her body coiling then exploding forward in one clean strike. The wrench connected with the guard's wrist. A sharp crack split the air, followed by his strangled cry. The pistol tumbled from his hand, clattering against concrete. Before gravity finished its work, Jessica snatched it mid-air. Now the storm was loose. Her stance shifted automatically, shoulders squared, pistol raised with flawless grip. She scanned the room in a sweep so fast it looked rehearsed. Years of drills had hardwired her muscles. She didn't think, she reacted. "Don't move," she barked, voice sharp enough to cut through the chaos. The men froze. Shock paralyzed them. They had expected compliance, maybe begging. Instead, they were staring at a woman standing like a seasoned operator, pistol steady, gaze unflinching. The leader's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jessica stepped back, gaining distance, keeping the nearest crate at her flank. Cover. Concealment. Angles all mapped in her head instantly. She controlled space the way only a warrior could. The guard whose wrist she'd shattered groaned on the floor, clutching his arm. She didn't look at him again. He was out of the fight. Her voice cut through the stunned silence. "Drop your weapons. Now." Two complied instantly. Fear made their rifles clatter on the floor. Their hands rose instinctively. They knew authority when they heard it. Jessica didn't sound like a civilian. She didn't sound like prey. She sounded like command. The man with the shotgun hesitated, knuckles white. Jessica's eyes locked onto him. Her tone sharpened. "Do it, or you'll be next." He blinked, then slowly lowered the shotgun, sliding it across the floor with a metallic scrape. The leader, though, still stood defiant. His rifle was half raised, but Jessica noticed the subtle shake in his hands. He wasn't as confident as he pretended. She took one step closer, pistol unwavering. Last warning. The room seemed to shrink around her words. The air was thick, charged with tension. Even the fluorescent hum overhead seemed muted compared to the pounding silence. Finally, the leader growled, teeth clenched, and lowered his weapon. He dropped it with a reluctant thud. His pride stayed, but his power slipped through his fingers. Jessica exhaled slowly. Not relief control. She was in command now. Against the wall, she ordered. "All of you, move." They hesitated. She fired one shot into the ceiling, plaster raining down. The sound was deafening, final. "Move." This time, they obeyed. Weapons abandoned, hands raised, they shuffled to the corner. Jessica tracked every step, pistol steady. Her breathing remained calm, her arms unshaking. She moved like a shadow of her former life, a life they couldn't even imagine. Once they were corralled, she adjusted her position, keeping them in a tight cluster where she could watch every twitch. The leader glared at her, fury radiating. "Who the hell are you?" Jessica didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any declaration. She let her stance speak, let her control of the room tell the truth. Inside, though, her mind hummed. This wasn't over. 6 intruders, and though disarmed, they weren't harmless. She knew from experience that desperate men could turn savage. One lunge, one reckless rush, and it could spiral again. She couldn't allow that. She remembered a phrase from a mission years ago. Control the chaos, or the chaos controls you. She lived by it now. "Sit," she commanded, on the floor. They hesitated again, eyes flicking between each other. She lowered her aim. Slightly, sight fixed on the leader's thigh. I don't like repeating myself. One by one, they sank to the ground, backs to the wall. The leader was last, his pride forcing him to move slower, but eventually even he obeyed. Jessica paced, slowly, pistol tracking. Her body never faced away, her angles always tight. It was muscle memory, the way she'd cleared rooms in hostile cities, the way she'd survived when others hadn't. The injured guard whimpered on the floor, still clutching his shattered wrist. Jessica kept him in her periphery, but didn't waste sympathy. She couldn't afford it. Not now. For a moment, the room was still. The intruders sat lined up, breathing hard, eyes darting nervously. Jessica stood tall, pistol steady, a sentinel carved from steel. The irony wasn't lost on her. Minutes ago, they thought they had caged her. Now they were the ones cornered, trapped in a steel armory with a predator. The leader broke the silence, his voice strained but mocking. You're not just some civilian. Jessica tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. She said nothing. You've done this before, he pressed. I see it. You're trained? Military? Cop? Her eyes stayed locked on him, but she gave no answers. She didn't owe him her history. The truth was, he wasn't wrong. She had done this before dozens of times. Raids, rescues, ambushes gone sideways. She had stood in rooms just like this, facing armed men, outnumbered, outgunned, and she had survived every single one. Now, her silence rattled them more than any admission. The mystery was worse than the answer. Who was she? What kind of woman? Moved like that, stole a gun mid-her, and controlled 6 men with nothing but calm authority? Jessica adjusted her grip, steady as stone. The pistol felt natural in her hands, like an extension of herself. She hadn't carried one regularly in years, but the weight was familiar, comforting. The sirens outside grew faintly louder. Help was coming, but Jessica didn't relax. She knew better. She'd learned long ago that the most dangerous moment wasn't the fight itself. It was the space between. That thin sliver of time when adrenaline still pumped, when men weighed desperation against survival. That's when mistakes happened. Fatal mistakes. So she didn't blink, didn't ease, didn't falter. She stood guard, a living wall of resolve. And though the intruders sat disarmed and silent, she knew the storm inside the armory wasn't finished. It had only just begun. The intruders sat huddled against the cold steel wall, their weapons scattered uselessly across the concrete floor. Sweat gleamed on their foreheads, their chests rising and falling with uneven breaths. The sudden reversal had left them stunned. But Jessica knew shock didn't last forever. Shock wore off, replaced by anger, desperation, or reckless bravery. She kept her pistol steady, her body angled to cover the group. She didn't move like a frightened civilian clinging to survival. She moved like someone who had lived her entire life in the geometry of combat, measuring distance, calculating sight lines, controlling space with precision. Hands where I can see them, she ordered. Her voice was calm, not raised. Authority didn't need volume. Authority lived in certainty. One man immediately clasped his hands on his head. Another folded his arms defiantly, glaring at her with narrowed eyes. The leader, sitting dead center, smirked despite the loss of control. He leaned back, stretching his legs out casually, testing her. Jessica's pistol tracked him with surgical precision. Fold your arms again, she said evenly, and I'll make sure you never unfold them. The man's glare faltered. Slowly, he raised his hands. The leader chuckled. Sharp tone. You've done this before. His tone carried mockery, but his eyes were searching. He wanted to unnerve her, to find cracks in her armor. Jessica said nothing. She had learned in war zones that silence was a weapon. Words gave enemies something to measure. Silence left them drowning in their own thoughts. The injured guard whimpered on the floor, his broken wrist cradled against his chest. Blood trickled down his sleeve. He shifted, groaning, but Jessica's pistol snapped toward him instantly. "Don't move." He froze. Even in pain, he understood she wasn't bluffing. The leader leaned forward, his smirk fading into something darker. "You think you've won, don't you?" Jessica's eyes never wavered. "I know I have." That reply hit harder than any insult. His jaw clenched, pride bruised deeper than his ego could tolerate. "You're not a cop. Cops don't move like that." Silence. "You're not military, at least. Not anymore. I've seen vets. They don't hold their ground like this. They shake. They hesitate. You don't." Still, Jessica gave him nothing. Her silence gnawed at him like rust on steel. Finally, one of the others broke. A younger man, barely in his 20s, blurted, "Man, she's gonna kill us." His voice cracked, panic seeping in. He pressed his back tighter against the wall, as if distance alone could save him. Jessica noted the shift. The group was fracturing. Panic was contagious. Fear ate through cohesion faster than bullets. All she had to do was keep pressing. Her eyes cut to the young man. "You want to live?" He nodded frantically. "Then keep your mouth shut and your hands up." The others glared at him, but none spoke. The tension thickened, pressing down like humidity before a storm. Jessica adjusted her stance, knees slightly bent, distributing her weight evenly. She was ready for a rush, 6 men lunging at once. She'd seen it before, and she knew the chaos it brought. She wouldn't let it happen here. The leader broke the silence again. "You can't keep this up. Cops will come. You think they'll thank you? They'll slap cuffs on you too. You stole a weapon, fired it, held us hostage. You're no hero. You're just like us." Jessica's jaw tightened. He wasn't entirely wrong. She knew how police reports twisted facts, how bureaucracies devoured truth. But she also knew one thing. She could live with their questions. She couldn't live with letting 6 armed men escape with crates of military weapons. Her voice was flat, certain. "The difference between you and me is that I walk out of here alive. You don't get that option if you test me." The younger man's breathing quickened. The injured guard whimpered again. Even the shotgun wielder, once cocky, now kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Only the leader held her stare. "You don't scare me?" Jessica tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Then you're dumber than you look." He lunged. It wasn't a full charge, just a sudden snap forward, testing her reflexes. But Jessica had been waiting for it. Her pistol shifted in an instant, barrel angled down. She fired. The bullet cracked into the floor between his legs, fragments of concrete spraying. Upward. The leader froze mid-lunge, eyes wide. The others flinched, ducking instinctively. Silence followed, thick and absolute. Jessica didn't blink. That was a warning. You won't get another. The leader swallowed hard, fury in his eyes, but beneath it, something else. Respect. He sat back down slowly, hands raised once more. Jessica exhaled, but her arms never lowered. Every nerve in her body was alive, her senses stretched taut. The adrenaline didn't shake her. It sharpened her. She had lived too long in combat zones to let adrenaline control her. She bent it to her will. Outside, faint sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Backup was coming. But Jessica knew better than to relax. The most dangerous animals were the cornered ones. And right now, 6 wolves sat pressed against a steel wall, their pride bleeding into rage. She would hold the line until the last second, because she wasn't just fighting to survive. She was reminding herself that some storms never die. The sirens outside grew louder, echoing through the steel of the armory. To anyone else, that sound might have promised safety. To Jessica, it promised complication. She knew too well how quickly law enforcement could misread a scene. 6 men, lined up, a gun in her hands. They'd assumed she was part of the problem, not the solution. She couldn't let that happen. Her pistol never wavered as she spoke. Nobody moves, nobody talks. You so much as blink wrong, I'll end it here. Before the cops even walk in. The younger intruder swallowed hard, nodding frantically. The man with the shattered wrist whimpered, but froze in place. Even the defiant shotgun wielder kept still, his eyes darting between the floor and Jessica's steady aim. Only the leader met her gaze. His pride burned like a coal that wouldn't go out. He leaned forward slightly, lips curling into a half-smile. You think they'll see you as a hero? No. They'll see a woman with a gun holding 6 men hostage. You'll be on the floor in cuffs before you can explain a damn thing. Jessica didn't blink. If that's what it takes to stop you from walking out with crates of weapons, so be it. The leader studied her, testing her resolve, looking for cracks. He found none. Her eyes didn't shake. Her stance didn't falter. She was iron-forged. By war, and he knew it. Minutes dragged. Sweat trickled down the younger man's temple. The injured guard whimpered softly, the sound grating on everyone's nerves. The tension thickened, a suffocating fog pressing down on the room. Jessica shifted slightly, enough to stretch her legs, but her aim never left the cluster of men. She was calculating angles, rehearsing outcomes in her mind. If they rushed her all at once, she'd have to drop the leader first, cut off the head, then pivot left, 2 shots to keep the group split. Pain would break their unity. She could handle the rest one by one. Her mind played through it clinically, detached, the way it always had in combat. Not fear, preparation. The leader tilted his head, as if sensing her thoughts. You're running the math, aren't you? Wondering if you can kill us all before we reach you. Jessica didn't answer. His smirk deepened. Maybe you can, but maybe one of us gets to you first. Maybe you're the one bleeding out while the sirens get closer. You willing to gamble? Jessica's jaw tightened. She shifted her stance, sending him a silent answer. Try me. The younger man broke again. Man, just stop. She's serious. I don't want to die in here. Shut up, the leader snarled, his voice cracking with fury. No, you shut up. The younger one's chest heaved, panic spilling over. This ain't worth it. Look at her, man. She's not scared. She's like military or something. Jessica noted the tremor in his hands. He was close to unraveling, and unraveling men were dangerous. Sometimes they begged. Sometimes they snapped. Her voice cut through his panic like a blade. Breathe, slow. You'll walk out alive if you stay still. That's the only way. Her calm tone steadied him for a moment. His breath slowed, his eyes wide and desperate, but fixed on her, as if clinging to her authority as the only solid ground left. The leader's smirk faltered. For the first time, Jessica saw it, doubt flickering behind his bravado. She had stolen control not just of the room, but of his men. Outside, the sirens grew into a chorus. Tires screeched faintly. Doors slammed. Orders barked through megaphones. Jessica exhaled slowly. Rescue was near, but the risk had never been higher. One wrong sound, one officer bursting in blind, and this room would erupt. She raised her voice, sharp and commanding. All of you, stay exactly where you are. Do not move when they come in. If you twitch, if you breathe wrong, I'll make sure they mistake you for the threat. The younger one nodded furiously. The shotgun wielder muttered a curse under his breath, but obeyed. The injured guard whimpered again, curling tighter into himself. The leader leaned back against the wall, finally silent, though his eyes burned. Seconds felt like hours. The thud of boots echoed closer, rattling the air vents. Jessica's muscles tightened, ready for the next storm. She pictured how it would look from the outside. A lone woman with a gun, 6 men lined up, weapons scattered. It was a coin toss whether the officers would fire first and question later. She couldn't let that coin decide her fate. Her mind raced through options. Lower the gun before they burst in? Too risky. The wolves would smell weakness and pounce. Keep it raised? Equally risky. Police might mistake her for the ringleader. Her decision hardened. She'd do what she'd always done in chaos. Control the narrative. The boots stopped outside the armory door. A commanding voice barked, "This is the police. Drop your weapon and step away." Jessica's heart pounded, but her voice stayed. Steady. Multiple armed suspects subdued inside. They're disarmed and restrained against the wall. I'm a civilian, former Navy, holding them until you take control. The silence outside stretched for a beat. She heard muffled exchanges, quick and tense. The leader smirked again, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. "Let's see if they believe you." Jessica ignored him. The heavy latch on the armory door clanked. Metal groaned. Light from the hallway spilled in. Dozens of muzzles pointed inward. Jessica adjusted her aim down slightly, keeping it off. The men but still ready. Her free hand lifted, palm open. "I am not the threat. The suspects are on the wall. Weapons are on the ground. Proceed with caution." For a moment, no one moved. Then an officer shouted, "Guns down now." Jessica's pulse hammered. This was it, the razor's edge. 1 second of miscommunication, and it would all collapse. She had seconds to prove control without surrendering it. And she knew exactly how. The armory door burst open with a crash that shook the concrete floor. Jessica's pistol remained steady, trained on the 6 men pressed against the wall. Light spilled in, bright and almost blinding, as officers poured into the room, rifles. Raised, eyes scanning for threats. Armed suspects. Someone shouted, "Hands where we can see them." Jessica didn't flinch. She raised her free hand, palm out, voice commanding. "Weapons down. Suspects are restrained against the wall. I am holding them until you take control." The officers froze, momentarily unsure. This wasn't the scene they had expected. A lone woman in jeans and a hoodie, standing firm with a gun. 6 disarmed men huddled and trembling behind her. A tall officer stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Step back. Lower your weapon." Jessica's grip remained unshakable. "Do not fire. They are disarmed and contained. I repeat, do not fire." One of the intruders whimpered, glancing at Jessica with wide, terrified eyes. The leader's smirk had vanished, replaced by a simmering rage mixed with uncertainty. The wolves had been caged, but the arrival of outsiders changed the rules. "Who are you?" Another officer demanded, motioning to her. "Why are you pointing? A gun in here?" Jessica's jaw tightened, voice firm and steady. "Former Navy SEAL, I live nearby. I saw them break in, locked the door, and waited for them to make a mistake. They were armed and dangerous. I disarmed them and kept them under control until you arrived. Do not mistake me for a threat." The officer's eyes flicked to the intruders. The rifles, pistols, and scattered crates told half the story. The expressions on the intruders' faces told the rest. He hesitated. Jessica didn't allow hesitation. She stepped slightly forward, pistol trained on the leader. "Check the room. I've got them secured. Do not approach until you confirm." The officers moved cautiously, their boots clicking against the concrete. One approached the leader, hand raised. The leader tensed, but didn't resist. Jessica's eyes followed every movement, every shift of weight. Her body was a shield, her presence a warning. Any sudden move and she was ready. The younger intruder whispered, She's amazing. The man with the shotgun muttered, How the hell did she? Jessica ignored them. Focus was survival, control, and timing. She had trained for this, always prepared for unexpected variables. Now, the variables were the police and the intruders. Both required precision. An officer reached for the leaders. Collar. The man flinched, instinctively leaning back. Jessica's pistol shifted slightly, reminding everyone whose rules applied in this room. Hands, she said calmly, where I can see them. Step carefully. I've cleared the immediate threat, but don't test me. The officer froze, glancing at his partner. The tension was tangible. No one wanted to make a mistake that could get someone killed. Jessica could feel their hesitation. It gave her leverage. The leader's voice broke the silence. You see? She's crazy. This is all some kind of setup. Jessica's eyes locked onto him. No setup. I am holding you accountable for your own greed and stupidity. One wrong move, and you'll regret it. The police are here to confirm that, not to replace it. The intruder's eyes flicked between her and the officers. Panic mingled with respect. They understood one hard truth. Jessica Kane had been their predator long before the police arrived. Check the weapons, Jessica instructed. Crates, floors, everything. Nothing left unchecked, and do it fast. The officers moved efficiently now, rifles sweeping, eyes sharp. Jessica kept her stance, pistol ready, watching. The wolves were alive, but restrained just as she had intended. The younger intruder whispered to the leader, Man, she's not messing around. The leader shot him a glare, but didn't protest. He had realized the game had shifted completely. One officer glanced at Jessica, suspicion flickering in. His eyes. Why weren't you outside? Why wait? Her gaze didn't waver. I didn't want them to escape. If I had moved too soon, they could have triggered a trap or grabbed the weapons. Seconds mattered. A pause. The officer processed this. Slowly, comprehension replaced suspicion. Another officer nodded. She's telling the truth. Jessica exhaled softly but didn't relax. Control was fluid. Any slip could reignite panic. She kept her eyes on the group, reading their body language, noting twitching fingers, shifting feet, and nervous glances. The leader finally spoke again, voice low, almost defeated. You can't be real, a woman like this, handling all of us. Jessica's voice cut cold. You're lucky the police arrived when they did. Otherwise, you'd already be learning why it's unwise to underestimate a predator. Her words weren't threats. They were facts. The weight of her presence, the precision of her actions, the calm authority, it all screamed danger. Even the officers felt it. Backup cleared the room, confirming weapons and restraining the intruders. The officers coordinated quickly, but Jessica maintained her stance, ensuring no one acted too hastily. Her mind raced. The moment the intruders were fully restrained, she could finally lower the pistol. Until then, she was the ultimate authority. One officer finally approached her. Ma'am, you're extraordinary. Are you injured? Jessica shook her head. No, I'm fine. Keep an eye on them and secure the room. The leader, now cuffed, muttered bitterly. You're impossible. Jessica didn't answer. Her eyes swept the armory one last time, noting the scattered crates, the displaced weapons, the subtle chaos left behind. Order had been restored, but she remained vigilant. The young intruder, still wide-eyed, muttered, I'm never gonna forget this. Jessica gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Good. Remember it well. Learn from it. The officers moved the intruders toward the exit. Jessica lowered her pistol slowly, but her stance remained ready. Years of conditioning, didn't fade instantly. Finally, with the room secured and the police taking over, Jessica exhaled fully. The storm had passed. The intruders were no longer a threat. Backup had arrived. Lives were intact. And yet, as she turned toward the exit, her mind remained sharp, aware that peace in moments like these was always temporary. She walked past the crates and rifles, each step precise, confident, unhurried. The officers watched, partly in awe, partly in disbelief. She hadn't acted for glory, hadn't sought recognition. She had acted because it was necessary. She had acted because she had to. And in the quiet aftermath, one truth remained undeniable. Jessica Kane had walked into a trap and emerged not just unscathed, but victorious. The wolves were cornered, the predators restrained, and the storm had passed. But somewhere deep inside, Jessica knew, storms like this never truly ended. They only waited for the next moment to strike. The armory smelled of gunpowder, sweat, and adrenaline. Fluorescent lights flickered softly overhead, casting long shadows across the crates and discarded weapons. Jessica Kane stood near the center of the room, pistol lowered but still in hand, her eyes sweeping over every detail. The 6 intruders had been secured by the police and were being let out, their faces pale, their pride shattered, their anger replaced by exhaustion and fear. The leader, still handcuffed, shot her one last glare. Jessica met it without flinching. No words were exchanged, none were necessary. He had seen the truth. The woman they had tried to trap had been their predator all along. The officers worked efficiently, inventorying the scattered weapons and checking the armory for overlooked threats. Their initial skepticism toward Jessica had evaporated, replaced by respect. One officer, a tall man with a badge glinting under the harsh lights, approached her cautiously. "Ma'am, that was incredible. You? I don't know what to say. You handled 6 armed suspects, kept them contained, and prevented disaster until we got here." Jessica shook her head slightly, keeping her tone calm. "I didn't do it for praise. I did it because someone had to. They could have walked out with those weapons and hurt people. I made sure they didn't." The officer nodded, understanding. Still, most people wouldn't have the training, the nerve. "You're remarkable." Jessica's gaze drifted toward the doorway, where the last of the intruders was being escorted out. The younger man, wide-eyed, turned briefly, glancing back at her. As if she were some mythic figure, he whispered to the others, She's not like anyone I've ever seen." The leader muttered something under his breath that was almost a curse, almost a concession. "This isn't over. You'll regret this someday." Jessica didn't respond. She had learned long ago that threats were as meaningless as words, if backed by nothing. Her life had been built on survival, precision, and calm authority. Threats didn't scare her, they were predictable noise. The armory now quieted, she finally allowed herself to release a slow breath. The adrenaline that had powered her for the past hour began to ebb, leaving her muscles aching, but her mind clear. The storm had passed, for now. A uniformed officer approached with a clipboard. "We'll need your statement. Everything you saw, everything that happened." Jessica nodded. She knew recounting the events would be painstaking police reports, always distilled chaos into bullet points. But she would tell the truth. The truth mattered. She walked slowly toward the exit, each step deliberate. Crates of weapons lined the walls, some tipped, some stacked neatly. The metal smell of the armory lingered, mixed with the faint iron tong of blood from the shattered wrist guard, now bandaged by emergency responders. She didn't flinch at it. Life, survival, danger had all left traces, and she had long accepted that. Outside, the air felt crisp, almost surreal after the tense hours inside. Sirens had faded, and the distant hum of traffic filled the space. Where panic had reigned moments ago, Jessica adjusted her jacket, letting herself relax slightly. A reporter had arrived, camera flashing, microphone thrust forward. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened here? Were you afraid?" Jessica's eyes met the lens calmly. "I wasn't afraid. I focused on what needed to be done. That's all." The reporter pressed further. "People are calling you a hero. Do you see yourself that way?" Her response was measured, thoughtful. "I did what was necessary. Hero or not. That doesn't matter. What matters is that nobody else got hurt. That's enough." Behind her, the officers secured the last intruder in a patrol vehicle. They moved with efficiency, their movements crisp and professional. Jessica watched, her expression unreadable, though her mind was alive with reflection. She thought about the mistakes the intruders had made, overconfidence, underestimating her, greed. And she thought about the choices she had made, patience, calculation, restraint, and precise action. It was a delicate dance she had mastered over years, the difference between life and death, chaos and control. The youngest intruder, escorted in handcuffs, glanced back at her again. His eyes betrayed awe and lingering fear. She gave him a simple nod, no words, no judgment, just acknowledgement. In that nod, there was a silent lesson. Choices define you. He had chosen recklessness. She had chosen preparation. The officers approached her again. "You should get checked out. Adrenaline and stress can do a number on anyone," one said. Jessica shook her head. "I'm fine. Just tired." Her voice carried the weight of someone who had spent years pushing beyond limits most would never endure. She didn't seek sympathy. She didn't seek recognition. She sought only to act decisively when action mattered. As the police finalized their report, Jessica finally lowered her weapon fully. She felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, but she remained vigilant. Old instincts died slowly, and for good reason. The officers cleared the armory. They would process the weapons, document the scene, and ensure all 6 intruders faced justice. Jessica watched them move with quiet satisfaction. The room had been her battlefield, and now it was returned to order. A young officer approached her. "Ma'am, I hope you know, in our line of work, it's rare to see someone so composed under that kind of threat. You're exceptional." Jessica gave a faint smile, almost imperceptible. "I didn't do it to impress anyone. I did it to survive, and to make sure they didn't hurt anyone else. That's all that matters." As she turned to leave, the weight of the experience settled over her. The adrenaline had passed, but the clarity remained. She had faced 6 armed men in a confined space, controlled the situation, and ensured that order was restored without unnecessary loss of life. She thought about her time in the Navy SEALs, the missions that had tested her beyond human limits, the nights where she had survived against impossible odds. Everything had led to this moment. The calm, the calculation, the patience, the violence of action when necessary, it all came together in the steel of the armory that night. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying a faint breeze that felt like release. The city lights glimmered in the distance, indifferent to the battle that had just unfolded within the concrete walls. Jessica stepped away from the armory, letting the police handle the aftermath. She didn't look back. There was no need. The story of what had happened inside would ripple through reports, witnesses, and perhaps local legend, but she didn't need it. She had done what was required, and that was enough. As she walked into the quiet streets, her mind was already turning, planning, observing, aware of every shadow, every sound. Life for Jessica Kane was never simple, never safe, but it was always controlled. She had survived the storm and emerged unbroken. And as the city hummed around her, she knew one immutable truth: Storms like this could come again. But when they did, she would be ready. Always ready. Jessica Kane had walked into a trap. She had walked out victorious. And the world, though unaware, had just witnessed the precision, discipline, and courage of a true predator in human form. The night swallowed her figure as she disappeared into the quiet streets, leaving behind the armory, the intruders, and the echoes of a storm that had been survived, controlled, and ultimately conquered.